Because the sound of the new songs is very different, because like Counterfeit was straight up rock and roll. Your solo stuff, I mean, there's elements of like Nick Cave, Patrick Wolf, a little bit of Amanda Palmer, even stylistically. You've got the piano, you've got the classical instruments. Is this the sort of music that you've always wanted to make, or is it just about, right, I'm going to go and try something else, as you say?
I've always had a vision in my head of something of great romanticism, theatricality, grandeur, delusions of grandeur. Someone come and put me in a box, take me back to the home. Yeah, I've always just been drawn to things that have been super emotive, and so with the first two tracks that I released, it literally came about within the space of a week. Like, I called Matt Terry, who is the producer and the owner of Vader Studios and a lifelong friend. And I said to him, I was back in the UK just for literally for 2 weeks. I think I had just finished my second week of quarantine, and I was due to fly out 2 days after we did the session. In fact, I did fly out 2 days after we did the session. And so I called him and I was like, yo, Matt, I've got this idea. I really want to just like strip everything back and just go to the piano, and these string players, they're keen to do it too. And so the string players and I were like just bouncing ideas backwards and forwards, and there were some things that were working, and I was like, oh God, how am I going to do this? And the time was like, you got to move on this now. And I was like, okay, fine. So I literally like sat down at the piano. I was at my mom's house and I was like figuring everything out. I'd send it over to the string players. They'd send me stuff back. I was like, that's great. Let's try and change that, blah, blah, blah. And then, 5 days later, 6 days later, we're in the studio and we were doing it. And it was just super, supernatural. Like, it was both supernatural and supernatural. It was magical. It really, really was magical. And I speak to Matt often. And he said to me the other day, he said, something really special happened in that session. And I was like, yeah, I agree. I totally feel you. So sonically, yes. I mean, when it came to those first two tracks, I wasn't really like, oh, I'm going to sit down and it's going to, and I want it to be like Nick Cave. Like, yes, Nick Cave is a big influence on me. I remember listening to murder ballads when I was in my teens and just kind of falling in love with that kind of world. But it was not the thing that I was like, oh, I want it to be like this. It just kind of ended up being like this because of the person that I am and what I've consumed. And then as I've gone on and as I'm continuing to write the album and as I'm continuing to just write music, there are so many great references for me that have just kind of, that I've never really drawn on. The Cure, Pornography is one of them for me. That whole record is just beautiful, and the way they describe the journey that they went into to make that record that was super, super, super dark, and they let themselves live in that dark place for quite some time to be able to write that. Like, that stuff really excites me and really interests me as an artist.
You mentioned earlier about liking the darker side of things and always having a flair for the theatrical. I know when you released these two songs, there was the whole Somewhere in the Shadows, there was this story, welcoming people in almost. I know I saw the tweets where it was like getting people in, and it was almost this whole process. So in terms of an album and a record, would you ever go down the concept album route, do you think? Or is it just doing it on a song by song basis, but then having this sort of theatrical element that ties it all together?
So yes is the answer to the first part of what you just said. When it comes to a concept album, yes. I mean, I have for this record a very clear map and path that I'm somewhat following. I have it pasted up at the studio that I'm working at, with a great producer here in Los Angeles called Zandy Barry, and he keeps joking because other people will go in and use the studio, and there's my map of like this descent into the darkness, and he's like, I feel so sorry for anybody that comes in and sees that, and I'm like, well, I kind of like that. So yeah, I mean, I do have a very clear vision of what I'm trying to achieve, and I think being older now, I don't want to give too much away because I want it to be I want it to be something that people kind of experience when it's out and understand, and I can talk about it more and take them in there. But you know, I'll put it this way, like there's so much great reference for me to draw on in literature as well as music. Something like Dante's Inferno is something that at the moment is really helping me glue it all together and drag it all together, but also personal experience as well.